Maureen Monte, welcome back to the Way of Champions podcast. I'm so excited. Jerry's so excited to have you back here. I was looking, you were episode number 7 with your last book, Destination Unstoppable. And here we are. We're at like 350 now. So a lot has happened to all of us since then.
Oh.
Well, thank you. And what a pleasure to be back with you both. I am so, that stat is such a great example of how you two have impacted the universe in so many ways with your books, with your conferences, your 350. That is crazy, right? And it's I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. And I hold you two as like at the top of the list of the people that are making a difference in sports today. So well done.
Oh,
Wow.
Well, thank you. And
very kind comment there.
You know, for anyone listening who hasn't listened to episode number 7, I highly recommend doing that. But we met Maureen. She came to our first ever Way of Champions conference, I think kind of right after that book came out, and we got to know each other. You attended the first couple. You and I spoke at an event in Geneva, Switzerland a couple of years ago, but been huge fans of your work. So maybe just tell listeners here kind of what you do, and maybe starting with a little background of your work in corporate, HR and development and strengths and all that, and then the journey from Destination Unstoppable to your brand new book, Win Like a Girl.
Yeah, thank you. So my background is in the corporate world is engineering first. Okay. And so, what I've come to understand in my old age is that I'm a people problem solver, not a product problem solver. Right. I couldn't design a bumper if my life depended on it. And I've worked inside General Motors. Anyhow,
we might have to edit that out.
Okay, we can edit that out. In 2006, I got a master's in leadership and business ethics, and nobody's interested in business ethics. Frankly, that's still true. I believe if it were, things would be different. But and I was exposed to the Clifton StrengthsFinder for the first time, and that is a tool that measures the greatness on the inside. So we talk a lot in sports about the intangibles, and that we can measure those things. And so I very quickly could see that information would help a team better understand one another, so that performance could accelerate. Right. So the greatness on the inside drives the greatness on the outside. There's no exception to that. I don't care if you're playing piano. I don't care if you're writing a book. I don't care if you're a brain surgeon. The greatness on the inside drives the greatness on the outside, and we can measure that. So I began to use it in the corporate world, had a blast. And I learned as it got bigger and bigger inside this corporation that I worked for, that the people in San Francisco had the same problems as the people in Singapore. And this process of measuring what's great about people, bringing it to bear. So I no longer resent you for being different from me. I value you for being different from me, right? And now then you expand it to the sports world, where coaches don't understand kids don't understand coaches or adults, right? So not just young athletes. 2016, I wrote the first book, Destination Unstoppable. I'd always been a lifelong athlete. I was MVP of my high school basketball team, and I'm only like 5'5", right? So it had to come from other things than my ginormous height.
Height was not a strength.
Height was not a strength, right? But I could shoot from far away.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
But long story short, I worked with my first sports team, Destination Unstoppable, boys hockey team. We did 3 things. We instituted Team Trust Bank, defined success, measured their strengths. And that was my first foray into what the male athlete StrengthsFinder profile looks like. And 6 weeks later, after we did a discussion about all that, and everybody had a role on the team based on their strengths, there were people that the glue guys and they became state champs, right? So I then had the opportunity to work with other sports teams, male and female, and very quickly I could see, both from a StrengthsFinder and from a behavioral standpoint, that the women athletes they're a different species. Okay. There's 3 species in sports based on my StrengthsFinder data. I'm up to like 2,000 people now, a little bit more than that. Coaches, male athletes and female athletes. And all their profiles are distinct, right? So there are things that the boys have a lot of, which is competition, high compete level, right? There are things the girls have a lot of, tenacity, which we can measure. And they work hard. dead last for female athletes is confidence. So and I was just looking at the data before I got on here. Let me pull that up. Out of 745 female athletes, only 15 have self-confidence in their profile. So
Wow.
We have a confidence crisis in female athletes. And we see it manifested regularly in many unfortunate ways. And I see it in many small ways. Being chased around a store at Target by a stalker and not knowing what to do, right? That sort of things. Or not being able to raise their hand and say, I want to switch roles, right? Or I want to speak to the coach. Those are things that female athletes struggle with more, right? So long story short, I believe and then coaches are not wired like either one, male or female athletes, right? So it's been a lot of fun to look at it from that standpoint. So as I began to see we have a confidence crisis, both I can see it in the data and I can see what they fear, right? Female athletes fear way more. Self-doubt has crushed their self-confidence. There is way more self-doubt than self-confidence. And I began to see that even at the national team level, they had the same fears that the middle schooler team does, right? And so how do we attack fear? We can attack fear because fear is a future state of what if, and if does not exist. And so you can attack fear by taking single steps outside your comfort zone every day. And by defining what the fear is and simply verbalizing it can make a big difference, right? Most of the female athletes fear being disappointing their parents, coaches, and teammates, and they fear being left out, right? So if I were to challenge a teammate that's not behaving very well, maybe the rest of the team wouldn't like me and I don't do anything, right? So those are the kinds of things that I've kind of come to the conclusion. So 4 years ago, as I began to see this data building, I started to work on a project I called Win Like a Girl, because female athletes take a different path to victory than male athletes. And as a result, they have different coaching needs and even different parenting needs. So I started with kind of a destination unstoppable approach, meaning I took a true team I worked with and they became state champions. And then the next year they weren't, but that's okay. I really could care less if they win or lose. I want them, the goal of my work is champions at the game of life. But 3 years into it, I worked with a book coach and they convinced me, with their knowledge on a lot of things, they were like, this should be fictional.
Yeah.
And so I switched and I'm not a writer. I'm an engineer. Okay.
Right.
I've never written fiction, like fiction, right? And so long story short, I converted the book to a fictional story. It has 3 parts: an introduction, then the story, which is fictional. But boy, the characters are all the characters you know and love as part of a sports world, parents, kids, ADs, coaches, and then followed by some research on why women need this to go into the workplace, and then followed with the playbook. But the fictional story gives you the playbook, but then the playbook, I describe it with series of activities. Right?
Yeah. I love the book. And before we dive into it, I would just want to take a step back and maybe explore some of these ideas around confidence. And certainly, you know, we've had people on this podcast like Nicole Lavoie from the Tucker Center and Kristen Diefenbach talking about, you know, women and men in sport and everything. And their argument seems to be mostly, and I'm curious where you stand, that this, you know, this is how we culturalize young girls, right? So it's the culture that leads to this lack of confidence. It's this culture of don't let people down, don't disappoint, don't look too good or don't look too bad, you know, just be average, don't speak up, you're not qualified. Is that how you see this as well? It's just this from a very young age, this is what we teach girls, and then this is how it manifests itself in sports and also manifests itself in the business world as well.
It's a great question. And personally, course, there's social expectations and social parameters to this, right? I'm sure there are. And frankly, I didn't fit them. And as the only female engineer in the room my whole career, I had to learn to roll with the punches big time.
Right.
Because they came, right?
Right.
But I didn't care. And I'm not wired like most female athletes. So I think there's two things. I think there's the social expectations and I think those are real, except why do they happen in other countries? Is it everywhere? Is this the whole global the globe, the whole world treats women like this? I don't know. More interesting to me is the data that I have that from the StrengthsFinder results that shows that I can measure the 9 different ways people build relationships. There's way more of that content in the female athlete world than there is in the male athlete world.
The relationship side of things.
Yes.
Yeah, it comes more naturally. Yeah, I would say
it
Jerry and
does.
I have seen
You've
that as
seen
well.
it,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And it starts when they're little in many cases, right? And so there's the two things. There's the data I have that makes me say, no, that this is why the girls bonds as a team to battle as a team, whereas the boys battle as a team to bond, right? And then there's the exceptions.
Right.
And there always are, right? And we are speaking in terms of generalities. But when we do get that female that's rip your face off competitive, take over the world mentality, those are measurable. Okay, I can measure those. And then we see them behave that way. And are they well respected or are they like not necessarily so much so? Are they seen as difficult? And they can be difficult, right? But so I think it's just, if it were that simple, we'd stop treating the girls this way, raising girls this way, and it would all change. I don't believe that. I don't. I really don't.
So you think there's some nature as well?
Do. And we're speaking generalities, but yes, I do. And I think we embrace that and then find their path to victory, which is that's Riley Reichen, the head coach in the fictional story. That's her journey. Because she starts out more as the rip your face off competitive athlete that's now a first-time coach, right? And suffers the consequences of not building those connections with the girls. If you do not build connections with most female athletes, they will not give you what they could.
Yeah, Jerry, jump in here because I know you have something to say about that.
Well, it's like I do have a lot to say about that, and I'm enjoying this conversation. I don't know if I want to talk. Maybe I should just listen.
Talk.
Yeah. So 75% of my clients over a 45-year period have been female. And I have to ask the question, why is that? Well, for one thing, my material has a lot of feminine quality to it, about caring, connection, love. The word love. The first time I used the word love in an all men's lacrosse, I was almost like thrown out of the room, It's like they didn't know what the heck to expect. They got used to it, but it was just not an easy transition. So the female species and the men species are different. When Anson Dorrance wrote his book, John, what was the title of that book?
The Man Watching, or
yeah,
no?
I think.
Yeah.
Well, he always talks about coaching women and how different it is, and what comes to my mind right away all the time when I'm in that room with a bunch of females is the females need a little bit about what we got, the men, and then when I'm with the men, I'm thinking these guys need a little bit of what those women have, So it becomes this fight back and forth, the balance, trying to get to that safe space where we're being full human beings, which will allow us to compete at our highest level, so that the men that I've worked with at the pro level, at the collegiate level, the ones that have been most successful by society's standards, and also some of mine too, is those who have garnered and embraced feminine qualities of hugging, loving, connection, and going deeper with the conversation about you mean a lot to me, and talking about feelings, and of course we come up and and we can get research to vouch for this too, feelings equal function. And to convince guys that feelings equal function, you think that was like a journey of 1,000 miles, you know? But for women, it was much easier to walk in and talk that way. And that's why I think 75% of my clients have been that, because it's easier for a woman, a female, to embrace when I start talking about loving each other and caring about each other and holding hands, which is a very intimate act, which men really shy away from. You know, it's easy to hug a guy, but have guys hold hands, OMG, it's like really crazy. But it comes right back into that whole idea for me is, what is the environment like? So confidence becomes a product of what the environment is like. Is it safe to lose? Is it safe to speak your truth? Is it safe to be tough and brave? For a woman, can you be tough? Can you be brave and not be criticized by your peers because you're not being ladylike, whatever the heck that means, you know? So anyway, those are some of the thoughts that I have. I'll just throw them out there. I don't think there's anything profound of what I said, but that's my observation.
Well, Maureen, I mean, do you, I think you would agree with that? And I mean, in your work with teams, have you found more of an accepted, like that the teams of female athletes are the ones who really are like, yes, we need this, bring it in, versus, is that your experience as well? Yeah. Just, it's easier to sign on with a team of females.
So a couple of things. First of all, and I am not here to plug the StrengthsFinder, right? I'm really not, except when I know their strengths and I show them where I start with what they're, because I get nothing for it, right?
Right.
I have no reason to plug it, other than when you focus particularly with younger people or people that are struggling on what's great about them, they will accept anything you give give them. Okay. So what we start with from a position of abundance, and Jerry, so when I look at the coaches' StrengthsFinder results, I can sort by gender, not just the gender of the person that took it, because this is the research I've been doing for ages, but the gender of the athlete they're coaching. And when I sort by the gender of the athlete they're coaching, and so whether it's male or female coach, they are wired a lot like what you just described. They're wired to be more of that ilk and bring that kind of perspective than the coaches that are coaching men. Okay, so first of all, you're drawn to that. You bring it. I think you're wired that way. Second of all, if I show male athletes their strengths, and competition is the number one, they are off the charts with competitive spirit. For women, it barely makes the top 10 of strengths. But then there's the glue guy that's got all this relating talent on the team, right? We make a big deal out of him. Now he's a hero, not just, some dude on the team that isn't maybe as great on the ice. So the men need it too. Everything I'm doing in Win Like a Girl, I'm doing with the boys. I just put it on the umbrella of Destination Unstoppable. They have their own fears. Their fears are not being left out. Their fears are losing, right? Not being a starter, being benched for doing something stupid, blah, blah, blah. So my take is help them see where the win is for them, starting from what's great about them is a great way to begin the conversation. And then they'll take anything you got.
Yeah.
Well, I find that my entry into their hearts is through understanding winning. And before I walk in, winning is what the scoreboard says. And when I leave, winning is what I say.
Right.
Is winning, meaning me, the athlete.
Right.
And what they do is they learn that scoreboard is just a reflection of how you're being, not what you're doing, and how you're being kind, how you're being connective, how you're being caring with each other. And by the way, how about a little for yourself and have some self-compassion? Because a lot of the guys, they're their worst enemy. They get down on themselves. And I guess that's a human being trait. But yeah, so this whole thing becomes a magical discovery. It's a mystery tour, and part of the fun for me, and you're nodding, which tells me it's also fun for you, Maureen, is exposing these young athletes to a new way of thinking that really enables them to expand their human capacity for everything, including love, which when you get into the corporate world, they might not want to talk about it that much, but who's going to
The great leaders do. The great
yeah,
leaders do.
the great leaders do, but who's going to deny the fact that your work environment is productive because there's so much caring and so much feminine quality to that environment, or more than it used to be, that kind of thing. And so winning is, I think, needs to be defined real clearly. And when it is for the men that I work with, they go for it. They open it up.
The way I position it, what you're describing to the male athlete, and I do it with females too, is there's a competitive advantage to be had if you do this. Mm-hmm. You want to win? Mm-hmm. There's a competitive advantage to be had. Mm-hmm. And we look at the one of the things I do is the controlling controllables, which everyone says. But when I have young men measure where they are today on a scale of 1 to 5 on being a great teammate, so now we start to track the things that are important, being coachable, right? Work ethic versus compete level, et cetera, et cetera. So that it's a way of helping them make it important to them and understand that the scoreboard is not a controllable, but everything else associated with it is, right? So
yeah, that's an operative word there, John. Controllable.
Yeah. Well, what I want to go, in the intro, you'll write sort of before you get into the fictional story as well, something that Jerry and I talk about a lot. And when we go and work, especially with female collegiate teams, you write, so many girls would rather be liked than respected. I don't want to exactly put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something we say all the time as well. And so when you seek to only be liked, then you ignore when the team standards are not met. You ignore the player who's going out drinking the night before the game and you don't say anything. You don't work hard. You don't compete for your spot. You don't push, because if I do, I might not be liked. I might be called the try hard. I might be called this. And I think that's such an important thing for coaches to be aware of. But also, the female athlete of like, no, when you fight, when respect comes first, you'll eventually be liked by the right people. Thoughts on that? Can I
jump in? Let me just hold your thought, because I'm going to forget this. I know myself. Competition, Maureen, you said was down on the list. Being competitive, correct?
For women.
Yeah.
For women, exactly. If I'm a woman and I'm competitive against you, Maureen, you might not like me because I'm going to hurt you or I'm going to make you look bad. And so I'm not going to compete against you. And what Anson does so well is he gets the females to compete against each other. And then at the end of practice, they all come back and remind each other, I love you. You know what I mean? So that's part of why competition is so low, is because of what John's saying is the female needs to be liked so much that if I compete against you, the fear becomes you won't like me anymore. What's with you? You're chill out. What's going on? Yeah. Anyway, so back to you.
No, I'm not gonna disagree with that at all. Right. The challenge with giving someone the power of liking you is it's not a controllable. And I'm sure you two could sit there, and I can, and think of somebody who drives you freaking batty. Okay. You're never going to like them. You didn't like them from the moment they walked into the room, and you can't wait for them to go. However, if they're on your team, there's ways for them to add value, but do not give someone power over you that you cannot control. Approval, liking, they may never give you that. And by the way, that person who drives you batty, you're that person to somebody else. I know I have driven people batty. So, and I need to manage myself so that isn't the case, right? So I'm a good teammate, so I do everything else. But nonetheless, they may never like me. And so don't give anybody that power ever.
That's an amazing statement. I see Jerry writing it down, and I just wrote it down too. Because I mean, the way you put that is so important, right? Giving someone the, you're handing off your power if all you're seeking is approval and being likable, and you don't control that, because you could do whatever you want and they're still not going to like you or approve of you.
Exactly. You could be perfect.
You could be perfect.
You could be perfect.
Wow.
So that's
fascinating.
That holds women back in the corporate world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I worked with a Black woman who wanted to apply for a job, DEI, head of DEI,
Mm-hmm.
and she said, "There's nobody there that looks like me." I'm like, "Well, of course isn't."
Mm-hmm.
Now get yourself out there and interview. You go first. You be the leader that others look up to. You've got the goods. You've done the training. You have the knowledge. You're good at this. You've done it in other areas. Go for the job. And she got it.
Mm-hmm.
I love the quote by I think Eleanor Roosevelt, and I'm going to not say this exactly, but wasn't she the one who said, "Never give anyone permission to make you feel inferior"? And she was talking about women.
Good. It's a great quote. Right? I don't know if she said it or.
Yeah. And that word of permission, how many times do we give others permission by the way we act and the way we're being with ourselves? And, the person you're talking about was giving the corporate guys the permission to make her feel like she didn't belong. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Love it. Wow. Before we sort of unpack the parts of the book and some of the activities in it, Maureen, one of the things that Jerry and I were talking about before we got on in preparation for the podcast is you make a statement along the lines in there of competence does not breed confidence in female athletes. And certainly I've written, and I say all the time, that we can't give people confidence like that it comes, you're not going to be confident unless you've done the work. And so maybe let's talk about that for a while, because I think this is really important, and I want to understand what you mean by that.
Yeah. It's a good question, because one would assume it leads to the other, right? The other thing that bugs me about what I read in almost everywhere about sports is that it builds confidence.
That sport builds confidence.
It doesn't.
Right.
It builds grittiness. You got to work hard. I don't think it does. Now, for those that it does, right? And they zoom upward. They've got the gifts, so they're already more confident than other people. But see, confidence is the willingness to start something you've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore you don't get the chance to be competent at something you're unwilling to do, right? Mm-hmm. So a great example, I think, is what I call the story of two captains. And I'm going to blog/video this here shortly. Mm-hmm. These are two stories. One lacrosse player was a 2-time captain in high school, went to play D1 lacrosse. And the captains had been picked by the coaches previously. Mm-hmm. So now she's a junior in college, more competent, very good at what she's done. And she was a very good captain in high school. And the coaches walk in one day and say, "We're going to switch it up this year. If you want to be captain, stand up and make your case." Mm-hmm. That means women have to raise their hand and say, "I want to do this." Mm-hmm. Right? And she wrote about this experience. And she said, every ounce of me was screaming, "Raise your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand. You know you've done it. You can do it now." And she didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And it was in relation to her work now in the corporate world. But she said, I learned that. She said, I have very few regrets. That is one of the biggest regrets she ever had. She couldn't raise her hand and say, "I want to be captain," and then defend it. She was afraid she'd look stupid. These are all the things that are fears that surround you in your comfort castle, and they keep you there, right? And nothing good happens in comfort castle. Mm-hmm. It's not safe. Mm-hmm. So she didn't do it. Conversely, I don't know if the name Eric Matson means anything to you. It didn't.
Yeah. Field hockey, UNC head coach, and probably the best college player ever. Go right ahead.
So have you read about how, arguably, have you read about how she went from player to coach?
I read the story in The Athletic about how she kind of went to the AD and said, I want to do this. I think while she was still playing.
He was her last year.
Yeah.
And he said, go win a state championship and then we'll talk.
Go win the
a
national championship.
National championship, then we'll talk.
Yeah.
And so here's the key, though. She did that. Okay. We could argue whether that's controllable or not, but she won it. Okay. She achieved that goal, but she didn't go back and say, I want to be head coach of this team. She went back and said, what do I need to do to get from A to B? And that's a real lesson for women. Here you are. You want to be here. What do you need to do? You ask someone what you need to do. You don't just say, I want that job. Okay. Or I want that new job or that role or that promotion or whatever. What do I need to do to get there? And then one of the most interesting things about the story to me too, was he found her interviewing the head coach of the football team who had been coached for like 50 years.
Yeah.
So Mac
Brown. Yeah.
Doing all the work to get herself to get out there and then kill the interview. I don't know, there were 12 people or whatever.
Right.
They chose her. Right.
Yeah.
So, but see the difference in behavior.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, if we looked at their StrengthsFinder results, we'd see reasons why. But I don't care, because you can train for confidence. She could have, if that young woman that refused to raise her hand or couldn't do it in that moment had been training for that, she could have done it. It's not hard. One thing a day outside your comfort zone. The updates I've gotten from athletes are things like, I went to the car wash by myself for the first time. I know. And I'm like, okay, didn't know that was such a scary thing. Good. That's where it starts. Right?
Yeah. I have to, so this is good. I'm so glad we talked about this, because this makes sense. So captain number one, she did not have the confidence to speak up and say, I want to be captain of this team.
Despite being extremely competent and had done
despite being competent. Yes. However, and I think this is the important distinction that maybe I wasn't getting when I first read it from you. She still needed the competence to say, I have the skill set required to be captain. So this is in no way, shape, or form saying that the only way to give girls confidence is to tell them you're the greatest and be confident and all this. Like, we don't give it.
That doesn't work.
You have to have the competence, and then you have to be trained of how to be confident of your competence.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Or even that's outside of it, because maybe you've got a person that's never led before, but they think they can.
Right. So to stretch.
And do that by stretching a little bit every day before you get there.
Yeah.
If you ask athletes, and this is in the book, what are you most afraid of when you're competing? Then you start to move inch closer to that fear attacking it. Right. And they find actually fear is nothing but a puddle. It's no sea. And your leg doesn't fall off if you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you can do this, but we just have to help them. But it isn't by that's why I have this, I rail against girl power, which is fake crap. Right. And but telling someone to be confident, they should be confident is like telling them they should be taller.
Right.
They are where they are. They're not taller. They are where they are. Here, let's work on that. One thing a day.
Right. Yeah, I like that. What are the small steps to get from A to B? Yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Well, I mean, let me jump in here. We're talking about, like Karen, the head coach, really liked her a lot, right? Am I right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. That really went a long way in terms of her. So two things. Number one is I love the way you put that, because I'm always looking for ways in to allow the other person to feel that they have power too. So like, if I go in there and say, I want to be the next head coach, this person's thinking, well, there are many steps. Whereas if I go in and saying, what are the steps? Then I'm allowing that person to do the work that they were hired to do. And help me out with that. So that, I think that's the psychological strength of your approach with that, Maureen. The other thing that I want to bring out is why not just let the team alone and let the team pick their own captain?
Well, I'm not. There's many ways. Many coaches do it many ways.
I know, but
she wasn't ready. And by the way, if she had had time to think about it, maybe she'd have made a different choice.
Right, versus just thrown in the moment. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. But the thing is, I'm in terms of education, there's a lot of coaches out there that need to know what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is the successful teams that I've worked with, Maryland lacrosse, 7 consecutive national championships, UNC lacrosse, Gary Gade at Syracuse. I mean, it goes on and on. Every one of those coaches adapted a methodology of giving the ownership and the responsibility to the team to choose the leaders. And we always preface it with what are the top 10 qualities of being a good leader? So now what we're doing is we're helping educate these kids in the idea of what a leader is. Now, based on those qualities, which 2 or 3 people in this room demonstrate most of that? You don't have to put your name on the top. We're not going to call you out on it or anything, but what's happening, you see, like, I just wanted to take that moment, pardon the interruption, so to speak, but I wanted to take that moment so other coaches out there hear what I have learned is good methodology. And I think so many times we miss the opportunity to empower women to make their own choices and to choose people that they know based on what a leader truly is, and not she's the prettiest, she's a senior,
top scorer,
she scored the most goals, those kind of things. So right here on the podcast is an education moment. So that's why it's all education, but I wanted to make sure that I got that point across, because I think it's really important. Too many coaches don't do that. And we need to empower these kids.
I think it's such an important point. And it makes me think of this guy, my dear friend and client, Shane McKenzie, who was a former Navy SEAL, right? What he said about I love this line that he said in his role as a Navy SEAL, he learned that people I lead have a vote in what they do and how well they do it. If you choose the wrong captain, you will have people that choose not to vote the other way and say, well, I'm not giving everything I've got. Right.
Yeah.
And that's true for coaches too, right? Meaning the coach in the book has that problem.
Absolutely.
She's not given. Yeah. The girls are voting against her, right? Whether she likes it or not.
Yeah. So let's dive into the book a little bit. Give us sort of the overview of the fictional story and the coach, Riley Raikkonen. Sorry,
she's Finnish. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, Raikkonen would probably work too.
Yeah, sorry. Talk about the book and the story behind it.
She was obviously a very successful college lacrosse, high school and college, blah, blah, blah. Typical, really good athlete that got there without being the best teammate. Right. So she lacks kind of that awareness, the emotional intelligence, if you want to call it that, the importance of connections. And it impacts not just her role as a coach, but her work life too, right? So it's her story of interviewing for a job, gets the job as a head coach at a highly prestigious school that's big on sports, right? And goes in with this win at all costs mentality, creates something called the winner's circle, where girls that do the right thing in the coach's eyes end up in the winner's circle. Right. And that if the more often you're in the winner's circle, then the person who's in there the most often, after every practice, she measures it, after every game, will be the MVP. So, and girls, it doesn't work well with girls in general.
Yeah.
So they, through a series of then games, and she doesn't respect her assistant coach, who brings kind of the more human glue side of things. It's actually a great partnership if the head coach, if Riley Raikkonen could realize it. So long story short, she fails. And finally, after suffering a series of humiliating losses, she values winning over everything else. She reaches out to her former high school coach, who, by the way, did not think she was a big coachable person at that point when she was in high school either, right?
Yeah.
So he challenges her. And somebody said to me, you were really that feedback moment when the coach is saying you weren't coachable then. What do he was quite direct.
Yeah.
Right. And I believe it's important to be direct if you're giving feedback to someone that really wants to be great at something. Right. So I didn't want to sugarcoat any of that. And they finally agreed to work together. He has been working with the Win Like a Girl framework and she introduces it to the team and makes amends with the girls and her assistant coach. It takes her a while to get used to this idea of being kind to people. But it's what happens then after that. The girls grow, the girls learn, the girls become powerful girls, not just these little fake girl power. They learn self-leadership. You are responsible for every single thing that comes out of your mouth, every single thing that you do. And so they kind of own their own destiny, and then compete and perform better and go to the state final. And then she relearns what the winner's circle becomes really the group united in a mission, right? So
it's so cool. I mean, as you know, Jerry and I we published this new book about being a great teammate back in May, and it's so similar. The themes of your book obviously focused just on the female athlete, and we wrote it for all. But like, well, what does a great teammate look like, and what helps your team connect? What helps your team compete? And then how do you lead? And so these themes are so similar. It's fun to read and go through them all. Anything else?
Well, you guys would know better than anybody that this is the path, right?
This is the path.
There is no really other path. There are other, you can try it and it may last for a while, but when pressure hits, it's that glue that holds the team together.
Well, that's what I like. What I like is you're not preaching dogma, you're teaching truth. And that statement covers everything that we're talking about. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who dogmatically want to drill something into your head, but no matter where you go, whether it's in the corporate world, whether you go on a basketball court, whether you come home to your family, this is true. We're talking truth about connection, caring, love. And by the way, we all crave it too. If anyone's wondering whether you need it, you crave it. And it's truth. And it's nice to hear people speak truth. That's what I like.
But Maureen, like building great teams and building this togetherness, it's not smooth sailing. I mean, it's rocky. And this is what I think a lot of coaches, when they see this conflict as people, right, sort of, the whole team forming, storming, norming, performing, whatever, right? They see that conflict of this storming phase when the team is deciding, well, what are the values we're really going to uphold and who is going to step up and speak? And then they dial it back. They get to the crucial part and then they pull away. And I feel like your book has lots of great stories and then activities that help you get through those difficult moments.
Right. Yeah. Because they're going to come. Right.
They're going to come.
There's no, that's why it's so important to understand that there's no safety in the comfort zone. Because trouble will find you. It was going to come. The crisis is going to come, and it may come in any number of ways, expected or unexpected. But the training for it and the ability to help them understand that I almost, even in the corporate world, I say we should be teaching kids when they're in second grade that there's no such thing as a team that comes together and works perfectly. There is no freaking way. People are people, and it's too hard to do that, right?
Yeah.
But the journey of overcoming those obstacles is what brings the group together. And the obstacles are going to be there. Embrace them. And I think it was important that in my book that the head coach not win over the one girl that was not win overable, right? And she's not uncoachable. She's not uncoachable right now.
She's just not coachable now in this moment.
She's not coachable right now. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and she never got there.
She's not ready. She's not ready.
She's not ready.
It's a readiness.
Maybe someday, right?
Yeah,
and that's
ready.
how she ends it with a speech to the team. Maybe that girl, Lexi, will be ready someday. She's not ready now. You guys were ready. And here's what happened.
What's funny? That reminded me of this, a young woman that I coached who was not ready, and we butted heads, and she went off and played in college, and then, came back to Oregon, not to where we live, but was working. And then I got like a LinkedIn request from her, and I got an email, and I'm like, oh boy, what is she gonna, say to me? And that was her moment 10 years later of like, you know what? I so appreciated everything you did. Just, I didn't appreciate it then, that was one of the best letters I ever got.
Exactly.
2,500 years ago, there was the first book of leadership ever written called the Tao Te Ching. And in that book, they say, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Yeah. Well, guess what? the teachers are there all the time. If the athlete's not ready, why does a coach beat up on him or herself? Or why does a coach get down on that kid? Or whatever it happens to be? It's all about readiness. When I was ready, I made the next step. There are other steps that I'm not ready for yet. I'll get there, but I'm not ready now. And people can't believe that. Yeah, that's true. True story, right? Yeah.
Couldn't agree with you more. And it's okay for that they are where they are. But parents and coaches can all play a role in that experience and helping them find that.
You just, again, you're coming out with these terms, but let's stop right there. Parents. I think parents are a big part of the issue that we're talking about here. Like convince parents who want their kid to get the next train to Stanford that what we're talking about is failure is okay. And not only that, let's embrace the failure as a learning opportunity. And second, what's wrong with struggle? It's going to come, and let's learn how to deal with the struggle. No, they want to protect the child from all of that. And then the kid gets to college, and at the first crises, which will come, Maureen, as you say, they don't know what the heck to do with themselves. And this kid who's been living a life of crises steps up and takes over. And so I think parents need to know, again, this is the education moment for me, but it's like, understand that failure is a gift. Everything that I am today is a result of thousands of failures, books being rejected for publication. And struggle is a good thing. My kids, I have 4 kids. I wish I presented them more with opportunities to struggle instead of running in and saving them. So parents are a big, you brought that up, and we have parents out there listening to us. They need to know this.
I interviewed yesterday. I'm slowly ramping up some of my own, I would not call it a podcast. I would call it a YouTube channel. But a woman that I held up as, but in my mind, having worked with all these athletes, and many times I get to know the parents well, the ultimate sports parent. And she spoke, she gave 3 things that parents should do and 3 things they shouldn't do. And the importance of encouraging the kids to take risks. She was big on that. And that may be a different position. It may be saying, I don't want to play on the soccer team, even though I'm on the track to be on the national team. I wanted to play lacrosse with my brother. She's like, great. He'd never played lacrosse. Of course, he was a great athlete and he was just fine. So, but she isn't like, her self-worth wasn't wrapped up in the children. Right. And that was one of the things that attracted me to her. And when she said something, and I'll share it, she thinks parents shouldn't go to every game.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Give them some space and time to be their own athlete without you watching. They're worried in the stands. Yeah. And, in my book, the coach, Riley Reichanen, she has no one has ever come to her games, right? No one from her family. And that was my case too. And I see these parents at the games and I'm like, God, wouldn't that been something? And my dad died when I was young, so he couldn't, that's part of the deal. But and my mom was busy with 4 kids, right? So it wasn't like I mean this thing, right? But nonetheless, I never had that experience, right? Yeah. And so to hear, I would have been like on the other extreme. I have to go to every game, I think. Yeah. But to hear that important point that she made, and I think she's probably right.
Well, one of your activities was called Parent Practice, and I want to sort of like maybe let's talk about what that activity was, and then maybe one of your other favorite activities from this book, because there's a bunch of great ones of sort of, they're basically conversation prompts and things that you could do with your own team or your own daughter, if you will. Talk about, let's go to parent issues first, because 100%, right? All the best coaching in the world can be undone by a parent in the car ride home, in the dinner conversation, saying you should start over Jenny, she sucks, whatever it is, erode trust in the coach, erode trust in your teammates. And oftentimes all of that's done by well-intentioned parents. I'm just building my daughter's confidence by telling her I think she's better than Jenny. So go ahead, Maureen.
Well, the only thing I'd never done in this book was that parents practice. Everything else I've done a bazillion times with athletes, right? So I feel confident. And I don't feel unconfident in that. But basically the parents showed up, a game is canceled. Lucy, the assistant coach, comes up with the idea, let's have a parents practice. We'll put them out on the field with the lacrosse sticks.
Yeah.
Okay. And the girls are coaching them, and, it gets a little dicey perhaps. And so, but they then learn, right, that this is not as easy as it looks to pick up a ball with a lacrosse stick. And I know that firsthand, having tried to do it. But so it's them switching the roles and becoming to be then the Girls Institute. And I think the trust bank is one of the most important things that you could ever do with a team is you are either helping the team or hurting the team. You guys know that. You use slightly different words, but, and one of the athletes asked the parents if they would please commit to the trust bank, which means you don't scream at the refs. You encourage all the kids, not just yours. Right. And, then the parent of Lexi, the problem child athlete, acts up and interrupts the girl. And it's a long story, but at the end of the day, it's getting the parents on board with this as well and committing to being a great teammate and creating the environment that will help the kids flourish. And it made a difference how the parents behaved afterwards in the games, right? In theory, because it's fiction. But so I think that was a lot of fun to bring that into the game, into the book, right? And the parent experience. The best at the end of the day, back to this love idea. And there's an exercise in the book called the Circle of Appreciation. And with both male and female athletes, if you will get a collection of them together, either the whole team shares appreciation for the people on either side of them, or you do small groups of like 4 athletes and they share appreciation for one another. I've seen this have a big impact on boys. They don't do a lot of this, right? They don't have that.
It's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Until they do it. And then it isn't, right?
Right.
But then they talk about how good it felt to hear those things.
Yeah.
Right. So we'd always debrief. What did you hear? Blah, blah, blah. Anyhow. So I think a circle of appreciation is and I use it in the corporate world as well, where you simply share appreciation for what that person brought today. And it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's excellent. And I'm going to verify that too with all my men's teams that I worked with. We did the circle, and these are professional athletes, men who had tears in their eyes doing what you're talking about with this circle. And it's just amazing to reach that level and feel so successful with these young people. Young meaning anything under the age of 40, to be able to express themselves in that way. And it's awkward at first. I'll warn anyone that tries what you're suggesting. It is a little awkward, but you know what? After the first 2 or 3, they get it, and they're not laughing anymore, and they're crying, and they're together, and they go out on the field the next day, and they die for each other.
Yeah,
that's how powerful that is.
You're exactly right. And that's the power of the competitive advantage of the connection with one another, right?
Exactly.
Because I remember watching Mahomes fall apart against, I think it was Tom Brady, when he complained to the refs during COVID that the crowd was too loud, right? Because suddenly they had a crowd. And I remember Mahomes was complaining about the crowd. I'm like, dude, you've lost the war already then, right? He got rattled. He was behind. Things were happening on the sidelines, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, this what I hope and what I have found to be true for those that have read it so far is that the Win Like a Girl book and framework provides athletes, coaches, captains, parents, a vehicle for conversation that maybe they didn't quite have before. And the power is in the discussion and then in the doing of the exercise. But when parents discuss these things with their kids and maybe haven't in the past, it changes. That's what I've heard from my parents, that it changes everything.
Love it.
Yeah.
Man, Maureen, this was such an amazing conversation. And that was a great, I want to give you the last word in case you have another final thought. But I also, first, can you just tell people how to connect with you, your website, where to get the book? I know you have on your website some sort of free videos and stuff like that, so people can get an idea of this. Tell people how they can get in touch.
Yeah, my website is maureenmonte.com, and there's a contact form there. My email is maureen@maureenmonte.com. I've got a Facebook page. I've got At Win Like a Girl book is the YouTube thing that's coming to fruition, where I've got some interviews out there already with athletes. in terms of, and it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
In America, if you want a signed copy, ping me and I'll send it, but it's too expensive to send even to Canada. Don't get me started on that. But I think at the end of the day, it's the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of the young women that you know, or even women in the workplace, to help them reach their full potential and not be afraid to raise their hand and say, I want that, or to say, that doesn't work for me, and mean it, right? And say no with authority, or ask for help. So those are the things that I think both female athletes and female women in the workplace, I have found struggle with those things.
Love it.
Raise your hand and go for it. Ask for help if you need it, and say no and mean it when you need to. Right.
Great advice.
Great
Amazing.
advice.
Yeah.
Great advice. Awesome.
Well,
Brilliant.
but thank you guys for this opportunity to share
this was great. I mean, like I'm trying to like find a place on my piece of paper to write another thing down. I'm out of room. Like that was awesome. So yeah, thank you so much, Maureen. This was a wonderful conversation on such a critical and important topic for our listeners, but well beyond our listeners. The book is Win Like a Girl, and like you said, you can get it on Amazon, and so well worth the read, especially if you're coaching or raising female athletes. So thank you so much for being on the Way of Champions.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Jerry, that was a fascinating conversation today, wasn't it?
It was very fascinating, John. And one of the reasons why I really liked it, it was an extension of the work that you and I are doing. And so we have another kindred spirit out there who's really different than us, but yet hammering the same message home, which I think is really amazing. And the second thing that I think is wonderful is, if you notice in the beginning of that podcast, for the first 20, 25 minutes, she kept talking about it's measurable, it's measurable. And this concept of measurement, it's important, not so much to me because my intuition tells me what's right most of the time, but a lot of people out there, especially in the corporate world, they want to say, where's the data?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you have that kind of data, like, 75% of these people or 80% of that, sometimes it makes a lot of sense. And so I'm really happy that she's doing the data piece of what we do without the data. Or we have sort of anecdotal data, but it's,
well, yeah, it brings it all together. And, she's certified and used StrengthsFinder in the corporate world. And again, the StrengthsFinder is a tool, like DISC is a tool, like eColors is a tool, but, she's collecting so many data points there. And I think fascinating that, of all her data points on female athletes, I think she said only 5 had confidence as a strength, right?
Yeah, which is amazing. Yeah,
which is crazy. Whereas that's very high in men, as is competitiveness and stuff. And so,
I was going to jump in on this one with the men, diving a little psychologically deeper into it. I think a lot of that, what appears to be confident when they speak up, is really bravado.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Were you thinking that?
I was,
right?
Yeah. I was like, I see people with this huge air of confidence bordering on arrogance, and I'm like, they are scared to death.
They're so scared. Inside, it's a big cover up, Yeah. So again, she does have measurement and data, but it's hard to get the real truth when you're asking people opinions about themselves. The other thing that that stands out to me, John, and I know you were writing this down at the same time, was just a simple concept that you give away your power when you're seeking approval.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you seek the approval of another one, what you're really looking for is the opinion of others, that they hold you in high esteem. But you're giving away power. Why? Because 50% of the people, and this is some wild guess that I'm making, but I think it's pretty accurate statistically, 50% of the people you meet will disapprove of you.
Yeah.
Whether it's the way you look or what you say or where you're from or whatever. Now, of the other 50% of the time, they will disapprove of you. When you go take it a little bit further, that's a lot of people. We're looking at 70% of the people or more that will not approve of you at some point or other. So if you're going to spend time trying to do something you can't control, why not just go back to who you are and believe in that and embrace who you are and go forward with it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that was a huge takeaway for me. Excuse me, especially how she said it, right? The way that she said that. And we always talk about, focusing on the things we control, and that seeking approval is beyond our control. And you'll never feel confident. You'll never feel belonging if you're giving everyone else the power over your belonging and and everything. So it was awesome stuff. Well, great conversation again, everyone. The book is called Win Like a Girl. The subtitle is Coaching Female Athletes to Become Confident at the Game of Life. MaureenMonte.com is her website. You can get the book on Amazon and all that other stuff. So I'll just sign off here. Another great week. And so fun to bring Maureen on from episode 7 to episode 350 something. It's pretty cool how we've stayed connected. I think we can definitely say when it comes to Maureen Monte, her influence is not neutral. She leaves a positive impact.
And she has grown from 7 to 357.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And that's what this is all about. It's about ourselves growing and becoming better versions of ourselves through writing, through speaking, through teaching, and what have you. So stay with us, because in another couple of years, who knows who we're going to be?
We might actually know what we're doing.
We might. That would be interesting.
Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you again next week.